Laura, can you hear us?
I can. It sounds wonderful.
Good. Sorry we're a little bit late, but that's kind of our inner nature.
We have a lot of excitement about Martha being here.
Yeah.
Exactly. It makes complete sense to me.
I mean, every presenter brings a different energy and a different gift. And you certainly are bringing a very special one. So,
Yes, and I was planning on ordering a mimosa, but then.
we have one prepared for you, actually, but we're going to wait till after your presentation.
All right. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Martha Sexauer. My husband, Paul, where you go? Paul back there in the corner. We've been married 30 years in November this year. And we have two beautiful daughters. One, he is here with us today, Emily. She's 24 and lives in Arlington, Virginia. I know, isn't that, it's like, when did that happen? And then our other daughter is 21 and is a student athlete. She's a rower at Gonzaga University in Spokane, go Zags. So we have been at St. Mark's since 2000. And sorry, I reached into grandma's purse there to get my clinic. And we've been at St. Mark's since 2000 and have loved all the changes and George coming on board, and have raised our children in the various activities here. And so I know this is streaming live on YouTube, so I figured also that entitled me now to become an influencer. So just to build my fan base, I'll be demonstrating my lipstick at the end of the show today, hoping to build my fan base. So just so you know. So maybe one of the reasons I've sort of prepared something and some talking points that we could discuss today. A little bit about me. In 2017, in my early 50s, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and it was a very low stage breast cancer, and with surgery and chemotherapy and radiation. As of May 2018, I was considered cured and, waiting for the 5-year mark. And then unfortunately, in August of 2020, they found a new primary cancer, which had nothing to do with the breast cancer. And that is stage 4 colon cancer. So it is metastasized, and I face some very real and threatening issues health-wise. And I will be having chemotherapy every other week for the rest of my life. So my perspective and my spiritual journey are greatly affected, and our family's journey is greatly affected by those issues. And so, as it relates to faith and God, I have a very complicated relationship with God, because I figured, hey, I did my cancer thing and that should be it. I did it with the breast cancer. I wore costumes to chemotherapy. I was like warrior princess. I got my head hennaed, the whole thing. And when it came back again, and it could have been found earlier and it wasn't, and I'm faced with what I'm faced with, anger is a very real thing that pops up a lot, and it pops up a lot as it relates to God. I run the gamut between like being really angry to the point where I'm like, I'm not believing in faith at all. I'm just really too mad right now to do that, to feeling that prayer and things like that a dedicated discipline to that for me would save me, not necessarily cure me, but save me from what this journey is going to look like. And so I struggle with that. And I thought it would be interesting as it relates to fate and destiny to sort of pose a couple questions to you all as it relates to, not, you can ask me anything, but there was a phrase that really gets me, and it's a controversial phrase that I hope we could talk about, because you're either on one side of it or on the other. And it's And the phrase is everything happens for a reason.
Okay.
Or you know, and you can imagine, you know, when people find out I have cancer, you know, the remarks that I get, you know, everything happens for a reason, or you know, God has a plan for you. You know, and I'm like, I'm not liking the plan. You know? And just, you know, things of that nature. And so, you know, everything happens for a reason popped into some of the Bible verses that I pulled up for discussion so that we could sort of discuss why we maybe could turn that around to liking it, or maybe we super hate it and it's never going to be a part of our thing. But in Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. In Proverbs 16:4, it says, the Lord has made everything for its purpose, ever the wicked for the day of trouble. And then Mark 11:24, therefore I say to you, all things for which you pray and ask, believe that you have received them and they will be granted you. Now, I'm assuming you know I did not pray to get cancer, and certainly didn't pray for it twice. So I was hoping that in the discussion of fate and destiny, you know, and the things that people say when you're involved in trauma, or just because maybe in your day-to-day life, you're looking at the path ahead and thinking to yourself, you know, is this all planned out for me? What are we on the free will side where it's just all random chaos? I kind of was thinking that maybe, and I'll start out with my perspective, something that I felt I could live with. Everything has a reason and God has a plan for you. And, you know, this is you know, your cancer is an opportunity for you. I'm like,
No,
you know,
thanks.
yeah, no, thanks. You know, I will pass. But what I have found for myself is that maybe for me, I'm okay with it all being random, and that bad things happen to good people, and that there's good and bad things that happen to everybody. But maybe for me, I am trying very hard to think that God can walk with me in this journey to remove some of the fear that I have, and to, like, where's that voice? Is that voice in me that sometimes I'm thinking is somebody? I'm sure that some of the voices, you know, are going to get me at St. Peter's Gate going, well, we're kind of iffy on you right now. But some of it is more like praying and thinking, okay, you can walk with me in this journey. You can be there for me. And you are all powerful. So therefore, if I'm going to believe that you're there, then I kind of have to believe that all the things that go with you being there are there too, so that you could walk with me and help me through this journey and help my family through this journey and see where that goes. And, you know, like the footprints in the sand and all that. And so I was wondering maybe what you guys thought, you know, how is destiny and fate a part of your life, and where does God fit into that? And I was really wanting to get you all's perspective on that, because frankly, hopefully some of you guys might have a really good thought about it and I could like glean onto that. So any thoughts on fate or destiny or something you've been through?
So I'll raise you two other Bible verses, one
Okay.
that makes everything worse and one that seems to make everything better. So
It's always the way.
Right, exactly. So Isaiah 45:7 says, I create darkness and light, I make peace and I create evil. So what do we do with that on the big end of things?
Right.
Now on the other end, I don't remember what it is, Genesis. So Joseph, you know, after he's in a position of privilege in Egypt, and all of his brothers came and say, yeah, you know everything we did now. And Joseph says, what you intended for evil, God is used for good. So I think I hate the idea of everything happens for a reason. If the assumption is like from the beginning, God gave you cancer because you have to learn, because he wanted to challenge, etc. Right?
Yeah.
But if it's flipped the other way around and we're saying God is active in the world and God will bring some kind of light in the darkness or bring good out of evil, that's me. I'm like, yeah, because that's like a really engaged way to look at
Right.
God's action, the divine action and human action in the world.
Right.
Because I hate, like, so I still don't know what to do with this Isaiah passage yet.
Right.
So that's how so if you want to redeem everything happens for a reason,
Right.
maybe there's chaos on one end, but we bring reason a lot, like humans with the God bring reason into the
Right.
world. And then we make something, I don't know. 'Cause
Well,
I'm
and that
very much
allows
a-
us, I think that allows us some freedom to take action.
Mhm.
One of the things that happened years ago, which has really stuck with me and really kind of just, you know, a girlfriend of mine, we were on a long driving trip, and very devout woman, and said to me, you know, their family was in a lot of crisis, and she had been working really hard. They had been working really hard to get jobs and things like that. And she says, well, God gave me this job. And I was in the passenger seat and I was thinking about it and eating snacks, and I thought about it and I thought about it. And I'm like, I can't let this go. I just can't. And, you know, normally she's driving, so, you know, she could kick me out at any time, but I'm thinking to myself, I can't take it. And so I said, you know, I said, so you're saying God gave you a job. What about all the kids that are starving? And, you know, what did God give that? You know, you gotta, where are you, like in some sort of hierarchy that you're, you know, getting a job and somebody else is starving to death? I said, I think that's just ridiculous. And, you know, obviously the rest of the trip was not very pleasant.
You didn't change your mind?
Oh, I don't think so, you know, but I think it allows us to say that we have, you know, where do we fall on that? You know, there's so many people that say, give that up to God, and you don't have any, that doesn't mean you have any responsibility for your life, you know, that you can't take action. Not that we're on the control side either.
Well, and I think a lot of that thinking, to me, puts us as an individual in the center of everything, and instead of God in the center of everything. So like, as we were driving here this morning, we were just kind of joking because we were a little late, and I'm like, so God, you need to give us all green lights so we can get there on time, right? And if there's an ambulance with somebody who's having a heart attack and they need to get to the hospital, you need to give them the red light so that we can get there on time.
Right.
I mean, but that's how ridiculous it gets, so that it's all about me instead of that, you know, God, there is good and evil in the world.
Right.
And
but it was better because I pray, Lord, give us green lights, and let it not the red lights come up onto us.
Right. It's always better to use King James English.
Yeah, it always sounds more, you know, it sounds more realistic that way. Like that's got potential. Go ahead.
So the passages that you said where God does everything for the good of us.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we as human beings living in this physical world, in this temporary place, think that those physical and temporary things are the good and the bad. My grandmother has a similar story. She beat breast cancer and went on to get a brain tumor, and then, you know, eventually passed. So during all that time, you know, in business, we say we don't have problems, we have opportunities. And so I think a lot of the, you know, everything happens for a reason, is people trying to reach for some greater concept, but ultimately where our treasures are is where our heart will be. And we are not of this world. We are strangers in a strange land. And so the way I always view the destiny thing and, you know, bad things coming into our life, so to speak, is I truly believe that God gave me my wife. Like, there's a lot of things about the whole situation, how we met and how spiritually, I was in the right place where if I had met her earlier, I wouldn't have been able to connect with her.
Right.
There was a certain amount of work that had to be done in my life before I could be in a place where I could receive this blessing in my life. I think it's got more to do with God working in our hearts and working in our spiritual world that's the scriptures are speaking to when it regards to that, because that's the important part, right?
Right.
Is where we're going after this. This
Right.
is the pre-show. This isn't the main event. So a lot of the things that happen to us in this physical world are a result of being in this physical world,
Right.
and not necessarily a good or bad thing.
Right.
They're unpleasant or they're really pleasant. You know, having a really nice dinner isn't necessarily a gift from God. It's one of the good parts about living here. And having a car accident isn't necessarily a curse from God. It's part of living in a society where there's people with cars.
Or, yeah, there's good and bad. Now, I have a really, I don't know if it's interesting or not, but it just popped into my mind. Ask how old you are.
I, 37, something like that.
Do you want to rethink that?
Yeah. I have
Sure.
to do math every
Final,
time.
Okay.
final answer, Kevin.
So,
Born in 84, so whatever that math is.
Okay.
Once you get between like 31
Yeah.
and 40,
It's all the same
there.
thing. That's all I know. It's like-
Okay, so you're at that place and, you know, and I wonder, as you get older,
Mhm.
ladies,
Mhm.
I'm just thinking, I know you're all in your 20s,
Gentlemen are not getting
but,
older.
you know, yeah. Does your perspective on we're all just sort of, you know, in this place, but as you get closer to being in the other place, does your perspective on it change? We're all just in this place, and, you know, like his perspective, I think is quite joyous. I really appreciate it. But I wonder if it changes. Does it get more fearful? Where does it go when you're older? And
Don't you think
know.
it depends to some degree on history?
Mhm.
I feel as though the three of us, who are similarly in our 80s, have lived through a very fortunate period for the United States, when we as women have become freer. Many good things have happened, but also at the same time, a period in the United States when our government has been going worse and worse and worse, and now we're at a point where I'm not sure we're going to recover. But I woke up the other day thinking, stop the world, I want to get off, and then I thought, I can pretty soon.
all right, I hadn't quite figured that kind of, you know, carnival approach to, you know, the Ferris wheel.
I have never, ever, ever felt that
Nice way of looking
Yeah.
at it.
I had a plan, that there was a plan for me.
Yeah.
Everything that occurred in my life, I thought, the Lord will help me through it. I look to him to be a support, but he did not plan the things that happened to you. A plan is not something I ever thought about, nor do I now. I don't think that either.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting, destiny and fate, and whether or not we believe in that there's a plan for us. I mean, is the plan, if there is one, that there is no plan, you know, or I mean, I always thought that the whole, you know, apple thing and the snake thing, and, you know, that we all kind of like, there was a plan and we kind of screwed that up. And so then we're now, you know, this is now sort of randomness, and how we deal with the randomness is where our spirituality comes from. How do we react to things that happen to us? How do I react to the situation that I'm in? How does Emily, as, you know, a young person starting her, you know, big adult life, how does she react to what I'm going through? How does she react to that for herself and her life? I don't know. I find it all very interesting. I'm wondering if maybe we could switch gears a little bit and talk about, you know, is there's a sort of a mythical relationship that we have to spirituality. And a lot of the Bible stories give us a way in which we can understand the lessons of good and evil. It's all there for us to sort of say, oh, look what he said. And you know, that's, and as it relates to truth or myth, you know, where do we all stand on how we view that? I was at a place mentally where I was thinking, this is all crap. And this is just this time and place where the human beings are using Christianity and the explanations of Christianity to explain the fear of death, to help with the fear of death, and to help understand the universe that they live in, just like the Norse did, just like the Greeks did, just like the cave people did with their myth. And it really isn't that we've evolved that much at all. We're still explaining it. We're just doing it in a different way. And I've since come off that a little bit. Sort of. But I was curious as to your perspectives on where do you find truth in how we view a lot of the Bible, and where do you find it as a truth for yourself, and how do you interpret it? How do you interpret it for yourself? Just thoughts on the big one there.
Well, the Romans passage that you mentioned,
And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose.
right. So I kind of think it doesn't, that God isn't causing bad or evil things to happen to people, but that we can take the situation we're in and find the good in it.
Mm-hmm.
And learn from that situation, even though it's a really difficult situation.
That's a hard one for me,
Yeah,
right?
and it is
You
hard,
know?
it is hard to learn in the midst of it too, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we've gone through a lot of stuff with David too, you
Yeah.
know, and it's hard in the midst of it, but like kind of believing that what can I, how can I grow
Right.
through this difficulty?
That's why, yeah, and that's where I would kind of change, maybe not finding the good, but making good out of it. That would be my emphasis. So even like, am I just too stupid to see all the things around me and not to see the good thing that's laying right there? It's like, no, I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to, no matter, in spite of what's happening, we're going to make good together as a family, as a
Right.
community.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
so
like the
I
phrase
lean
in
real
spite.
hard on that
Mhm.
creative.
Yeah.
In spite of,
Right.
like, for me, in spite of what I'm going through, I'm trying very hard. I often, as George knows, I'm always in trouble for a slight bent toward irreverence. And
When did that
Fine with
just-
me.
when did that just become slight? I thought that was, I thought it was.
did I raise that to an art form? Yeah, okay, well, I wasn't gonna go there, but okay, I'll take that one. I'll take that
So
one for the
Martha,
team.
you were talking about the Bible,
Yeah.
and so this is a time to kind of like look in two directions at the same time. I know,
Yes.
which is hard, which Episcopalians like to do. So you have
We
to,
do.
you have to complexify and simplify. I mean, the Bible is huge, enormous. I mean, it is overwhelming to kind of summarize. So, I mean,
Right,
you know, we could do a lot of deconstructing of it, and there's so much there, which is why it's so such a powerful resource, and we continue to go to it, because it's not just like one note.
Yeah,
Right. I
you're
mean,
right.
the simplifying part, though, I mean, to me, when, you know, you have to find threads that guide us. So I, you know, as a Christian, I go to Jesus, right? What is Jesus doing? What is he telling us about death? You know, he's not saying, he never says like, okay, don't be afraid of death. He never says that. He
Right.
does say, he talks about life.
Yeah.
He says, I have come to bring you life. I have come to bring life and make it more abundant. This is what he is about. And I mean, if maybe you can find some quotes where Jesus says, don't be afraid of death. I don't think he ever says that,
Yeah.
you know? And so I kind of look at that as one guide.
Yep.
So who is Jesus? And I think as Christians, Jesus comes very close to us, comforts us, holds us, has, you know, I mean, that is such a pastoral gift that we have as Christians. And unfortunately, he's been turned into a judger, a condemner, somebody who is going to flip on you and say, okay, flee from me now.
Yeah,
He does tell certain people to go and not to follow him because they need to spread the news of God's love, right? That's not saying he's not with them. But I think that, so the complexifying and the simplifying are both activities that kind of have to happen at the same time.
I love that you said that, and I love that you brought up the abundance, because it just occurred to me, what if I didn't even have this opportunity? What if this didn't exist for me at all? I can have the opportunity now to do things in spite of, right? I can have the opportunity to, I can be angry, and that's okay. But I now have something that is offered to be alongside me if I choose, you know, and how do I choose to do that for myself? What if this was not here at all? You know, I think isn't that the gift? I mean, isn't that the I mean, maybe that's the point of it all, is that now I have this opportunity, and how is this going to help me and my family get through what we're working toward, and how can I find abundance in spite of, you know, and there's a lot of craziness and support and love and just reaching out and all sorts of different things that have happened in my life that would not have happened without cancer. I'd still trade it.
Right.
But sometimes sometimes it's just about those little tiny specks that you can grab onto, the tiny little stuff that you can't get up with a vacuum cleaner, you know, just the real tiny stuff in the big shag carpet. And but I just like that. I just really like that, George. That was sort of a little epiphany for me right there, just to think about, well, he's there to bring abundance to my life. My choice whether or not to accept that abundance, you know, that's on me. So I don't know. I'd be interested to hear if some of you have had experiences where just those flashes of abundance, you know, where did that fit into your life? Where did you maybe go through something, or maybe it wasn't, maybe it was a joyful experience. We don't have to focus on, like you were talking about, the blessing of being given, you know, your wife, and how she's in abundance.
And I saw, and the biggest thing with that is I saw God's patience with me, all of the anger and yelling and frustration of years of being like, well, I have nothing in this world. Why are you even like bothering keeping me here?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of him taking the wounds that I was inflicting upon him and just being patient, like, I got something for you. Hold on, I'll take it. You're good.
Yep.
And then now being in this season of my life where I'm like, I am so sorry, God, for all the things I did in my
Right.
youth. You know, the foolishness of youth is something to look back upon and be like, oh man, cringe, right? But there's also a blessing in being able to have that contrast. The thing from Isaiah that you were talking that you shared, you know, good and evil, light and darkness, contrast gives clarity. It's the thing that I thought when you were saying that. There is a certain amount of, like with TVs, if there's not contrast, it's all a blur, you can't see anything. But having contrast lets you see the definition of stuff. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah. I can go a certain extent with that. There's like, there's a point after which I'm like, we don't need this contrast in here. But I agree, sure. And that might be the condition of being created instead of the uncreated, and
Yes.
only the Trinity is uncreated. So I think there's a lot to do with chaos that is opportunity, and then the fall that happened. We're looking things, instead of just being chaotic, actual evil exists. Evil is privation. Evil doesn't exist. It's not a metaphysical reality. It's how we understand things. It's something that is doing the opposite of what should, like, or we're deeming it like cancer, the way that cells are changing.
Right.
In a way, those cells themselves, they're neutral. They're chaotic neutral for all you D&D fans. They're chaotic neutral. It's us saying, these are expectations. Look at what's doing to me. Look what's doing to my family. Look what it's doing to my loved ones. Then we look at that and we say, that's evil.
Right.
So it's all, so that same spot of where we're getting this comparison, whether it's scripture or how our relationship with the people in our lives.
Right.
That's also where I want to look at saying, what is my relationship to you? And this thing that's happening that could be technically neutral, I'm going to say it's good or bad because of the relationship
Right.
between us. So as a librarian, we've got fiction and nonfiction. Those are the two biggest separations in the library, right? So I had a young person ask me what the difference was. And I said, the fiction are the stories that people wrote that didn't happen in real life. Nonfiction is either things that did happen in real life, or it's not trying to be. So you got poetry and so that's more like real life, but it's not trying to make a story that is, it's not trying to make an original story. So they said, oh, so fiction is not true. I was like, no. Truth, meaning, creativity, these come up in the person. So like you said, with scripture, we have so many of these stories. That's why I think I love that we have so many stories. Like I love Kings and Chronicles and Judges. A lot of things are like, oh, that's just battles and people doing things. I'm like, no, there's so much drama in there. So it's all this continual creative, how do I find meaning and connection to Jesus, because we're Christians, into my life and our relationships. It's constant. There's never I'm gonna unzip the space-time continuum and that's reality in there. That's what scripture means of everything.
Right.
It's like, that can't happen. It's a constant creative movement.
I think something that's hard for us too as humans is to stay present in the now. We spend so much time, lamenting the past or longing for a future when we can't do anything about the past. And in most practical ways, we can do nothing about the future.
Right.
Either have any control over that. But the only reality that actually exists is now. And it's so hard for us to stay present in that. And
Yeah.
and as wonderful as meeting him and having him is, I know that can be done in an instant.
Right.
A moment can change everything. So the older I get, the less and less I find myself,
Right.
looking to the future. I'm just trying to enjoy what I have now because you never know.
And that's a discipline. Being present is a discipline.
And it's painful.
It's very painful and it's very difficult. And as a cancer patient, we find ourselves, if you've been through something that's chronic or been through something that's traumatic physically, you're always looking to the next step, preparing for the next step, girding your loins for the next step and wanting to get there. I need to get to Z. I'm at A, I need to get to Z. Z is like cure, Z is whatever I need it to be. And so that function, that mental function to do that is very difficult. And one of the disciplines that I've tried to give myself is to sort of start out with a thought about God at the beginning of the day and end my day with a thought about God and a prayer, to try to begin and end, and then somewhere in the middle to try to be present. We were dealing with something, Emily and I were dealing with something last night, and we just had a moment where, looking at the future and looking at things in our lives that are difficult was upsetting to both of us. And I said, but let's be present with each other right now. Right now, we're fine. We're in a gift with each other. Let's be present. And how often do we just stop and be like, okay, we're just having coffee. Isn't that a great gift? We're just going to take a moment and be present and oh, wait, I got to do this. I got to do that. Fast. It'd be better if we were all Southern, at least we could maybe slow down a little bit, and eat the peaches. But I don't know. I find that a very difficult discipline is to be present in because it's funny. The past has difficulties that wake you up in the middle of the night sometimes. And the future, like I never seem to be woken up in the middle of the night about something great that happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is that so difficult? Why is the future so difficult when I can concentrate on the present, which is not so difficult?
Yeah.
It's funny that way. I find that a conundrum, George.
That's why we're together. To work
That's
through it.
right.
Well, and
That's right.
especially because it's like the only time really that you can find peace is right now.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I was yesterday. I wish so much my daughter was here. She's probably still asleep. A 15-year-old, but we were driving and she was asking me these exact questions, and she's of my three kids, she's the one who, when it came to confirmation, she's like, no, this whole God thing, this whole Jesus thing, no, and yesterday she was like, yeah, okay, so I'm starting to think, and my husband's Buddhist. She's like, and when she stopped coming to church, she was like, I'm Buddhist. I was like, really? Have you been practicing meditation with Papa? So,
Yeah.
Well, I'm Buddhist. I'm like, okay. So yesterday, there was a tragedy of a high schooler was in a horrible car accident, and she knew people that knew him well, and so that was kind of going through her mind. And she said, maybe can we go, because she's learning to drive, so can we go practice driving? And I said, okay, sure. And that's always when the best conversations happen with me. She's behind the wheel and she's driving, and then she says things like, okay, so maybe, do you believe in fate? And I was like, oh my gosh, really? Seriously? And I heard myself say, well, you know how Papa tells that story of how the Buddhist story about things happen. So like the story goes, and I'm not going to get it right exactly, but a farmer is down on luck and is not getting anything, and then somehow a horse appears, and this is great because now he has a horse, and everybody tells him, oh, this is the greatest thing, and then his son rides this horse and he falls off and he breaks his leg, and they say, oh, so that great thing was actually terrible because now your son has this broken leg and he can't work in the fields. This is terrible. And then a few months later, the country goes to war, and all young men have to go fight in the war, but his son has a broken leg, so his son doesn't have to go to war, and everybody else's son dies in battle, and this son is healed, and now it goes on and on and on. And I heard myself say, so maybe that's kind of fate, kind of not. Like you have and I didn't even know where I was going with that. I still don't know where I was going with this, but I'm so glad that this conversation, I'm not sure what I'll be able to share with Mala today to bring her back to church.
Well, it's very hard to go through fate and destiny when you're white knuckling it as she's behind the wheel,
Exactly.
I
I
get
was
it.
thinking the conversations I had with Lydia when she was driving, like,
I know.
wow, I'm just
Well,
in
I
awe.
know,
of
I'm
her.
so impressed.
That
I'm so
part
impressed.
was actually after she had parked, and so we were parked and it was one of those in the Target parking lot. So that part of the conversation. The other
I
part,
was gonna
believe
say,
me,
I
was,
know,
I was facing death right in front.
Yeah, I was telling Adela, you're gonna be driving with your father from now on.
Yeah.
That's your destiny.
Pay attention to the road ahead.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Oh. The dark horse.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing, just to, So when I got here to church this morning, doing my stuff, and Josh comes in and says,
Where'd it go?
it's gone.
It's gone.
The spire is broken.
Oh.
God. the
Part of
wind
it
died.
fell
the
over in the
wind.
middle.
Like in the
of
wind.
it. I'm like, if you go out there, it's like it's been decapitated, right?
Where is it?
It's on the roof. The part, it fell over, and I've got some pictures, and hopefully I sent them to Laura, and she can put them maybe in a slide for us. In
Yeah, I'm
church.
actually doing that right now.
I thought, here's
It's
something.
scary.
Is it a sign?
It's a sign the wind blew.
Well,
Right.
exactly. Right. So when college church's steeple fell over, I was just thinking, serves them right. And then I'm like,
It's a
oh,
sign from God.
no, I'm thinking it's like, George, you should not, and people in glass houses should not. No, I'm tongue in cheek about that when their steeple fell over, but I'm thinking, some people could interpret that as a sign. Okay, so God is telling us something. And I think, as Edna would say, to me, that is the sign. It was a 70-mile-an-hour wind.
Yeah.
And, I was wondering what's going to be broken over here? And I had no idea that was going to be it. But what is the other way to look at that? That is that, our spire is broken, but our spirit isn't. That's another way to look at it. So how do we twist it? Or how do we see it? But there are people who would say that's a condemnation of this church, and God is teaching you a lesson. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm just seeing that as one example of like how it could be interpreted.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say things like this happen, right? 70-mile-an-hour winds are going to hurt things. And how do we go with it? So this is a very present moment with that thing. It hit the roof. There's a gouge in the roof. It could leak, but thank goodness we have insurance. So that's a good thing.
Thank God for
But anyway,
insurance.
so, I don't know. I think it ties in just this very kind of thing that happened this morning.
Well, and I think that people
Things were
say things.
accomplished today, now, with Martha here, I think that's what's been accomplished. The wind just took that spire down, but that's okay. We're here and we're doing.
Now we can shop for a new one.
Martha, I have a project for you.
And you can be our influencer.
She's inspiring.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
What a pillar. What a pillar.
You've been here all week trying to. I know.
I think Paul needs to come up to the table.
Yeah, and you know what? Here's the funny thing. Paul is not funny.
Right?
That's not his role.
No.
By the way, your script,
Yeah.
you stole it
Oh, okay.
20 years earlier.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that I am grateful that, it's because of God that we are in this community, right? And that this community helps us get to know one another and to love one another and support each other through the various things we each go through. And we take turns doing that. And so, back to what George was saying earlier about simplifying things, to me, that right there is simple. We're here because of God's love. We try to hold each other up through the difficult times. And, who are we to question why things happen? They just do. But we can help each other through it. So
I think
Martha.
that's well said by the award-winning community.
Oh, stop, please. But I just am so grateful you're here and that we all are a part of your life and you're a part of ours. And hey, Emily, it's good to see you.
That was sweet. And I think that
It's so
people
true,
say the things that they say because they're trying to find a way to explain things for themselves or to deal with their own discomfort. But they say horrible things.
Oh.
So we went to a church where the pastor's daughter got cancer in the leg. She was 17 and had to have her leg amputated above the knee. And people said to him, well, his 17-year-old daughter is in the hospital. People were saying, oh, well, God gave Becky cancer because you preach the love of God too much and you don't preach the wrath of God enough. And, they had all these reasons and it was horrible. But I thought, a lot of that is, it's horrible to think of this 17-year-old girl getting her leg amputated. And people are trying to find a way to deal with their own,
Explain
to
it.
have an explanation.
Something that matches.
But then
the
they say these
insanity.
things that are horrible.
Yeah.
And here, and
Oh, Job's comforters,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Job.
Yeah.
I think that's as bad as saying, God gave you this because he knew you could handle it.
right.
Oh, that makes you want to
Yeah.
scream.
Well, you said that last week, Diane, that people said that
Sure.
with
Yeah,
you
yeah.
and Rachel,
Yeah. And that's,
It's a gross misinterpretation of that scripture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the whole, God won't ever give you more than you can handle.
yeah.
That's a
yeah,
tough
right.
one.
Yeah.
That's a tough one because, people are like, oh, with the things that you go through, what was it? Lynn Wallstedt recently was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And I feel okay saying that because she's posted it all on Facebook. So, and she's calling it the brave and inspirational show, but there's a little expletive in there. And,
Oh, yep.
and she says, now everything I do from now on, because I have breast
Right,
cancer, is
yeah.
going to be considered brave and inspirational.
Yep.
And I said, and I laughed at that because my experience in what I'm going through is that happens, oh, you're so brave. Not really, what else are we going to do?
Yeah.
We take another step forward. I can either lie down in bed with a bottle of tequila and call it a day, or I can get up, come to adult formation, show off my lipstick, and talk about God for an hour, and I kind of prefer, there are days when I would take the tequila,
Yeah.
but there are days when there are most days when I'm grateful to be in this community. And Kim, that was just a wonderful, that's wonderful to say that it brings me back to what George says about what if this didn't exist? We've had, this church community has been through quite a bit since we started in 2000 with, the 2000 and 2002 unpleasantness, as an Episcopalian would say, the unpleasantness, this recent unpleasantness, and that ensued and all that. And it's a place that we can come to explore our growth and how we feel about God. And it's okay. And what a wonderful community that we can come and explore the fact that I have difficulty with faith, and George says that's okay.
It's actually a good sign.
Yeah, and that I'm not at a church where the community requires me. How frightening to be at a place that you're not free. The whole point of this community is to be free to explore your relationship with God. Isn't that the point?
Yeah.
And if you're not free to do that and you're condemned or you're told how to think, I mean, what's the point of that? Then it's not your relationship, it's somebody else's relationship.
And it's also not your relationship with God, it's your relationship to whatever.
To that person.
Or to that
right?
entity or to that, group. Yeah.
Yeah, I expect God and I are going to have some very interesting conversations. I mean, first and foremost, I worry because the angels, the wings, I have allergies.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I love the idea of this community. This community has meant a lot to us, and I've learned a lot from this community just by engaging. I think the more you engage, the more you give, the more you get. And I think that is very true here. I've had some belly laughs. And then there are a couple of people I wanted to totally punch in the face.
You're looking at Joyce when you say that.
No, I'm like, Joyce. Yeah. Well, I say that to you because you and I have been there. since the beginning.
Right.
You know, and I've
We
known
were,
you that long.
do you remember we were at the same newcomers brunch?
Oh,
over
right.
there.
Oh, my.
Gosh, that's right.
Yeah,
And
and I think you,
Adrian
and I
and,
think,
yeah,
yeah, and I think you were pregnant, maybe.
in 2000.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
pregnant and.
This one was,
Henry
was a
little.
toddler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember being over there, you know, when that was the rectory and being there and we were at the
Oh,
same
yeah.
newcomers brunch.
Yeah. It's a good, you know, interesting, but good times. Or not. But yeah, I like that. I like the sense of community here. I like that my daughters, one of the things that's been interesting that has come up, just as a little brief aside, is that I know quite a few people that have said, we're not going to take our, you know, our kids don't have to go to church because they'll figure it out when they're an adult. And my mother said once, she said, you know, I brought you to church so that you'd have a platform of understanding of what church life is, so that, and then once you're an adult, you can make your own decisions. You could go be, I mean, God forbid, a Methodist. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I'm kidding. A Lutheran. No, but you could go do anything you want. And if you choose not to be a church member or not, you at least understand what that is. And she says, I like the idea of being an Episcopalian because wherever I go, I know that service is going to be something that I know and that I'm familiar with. So I can go into any community and find a church. And I think that's a blessing here, that we're a community that not only provides a service that you can rely on and know what it's going to be and feel rejuvenated by it, but you can also find a community here that opens itself to you in such a multitude of ways. And you are the community general. I mean, if anybody is open to new opportunities for a church and what that means to be open and out to the community
And
in so many different ways, to welcome within and welcome without. I give you a big unfettered
Yeah,
hug.
well, it's what's here,
Yeah.
right? And you know, we just have to point to it,
Right,
right? And see that reality, right?
right,
Like it's the abundance that we're talking about. We have to name it
right.
and see it, and that's part of the work. And we have to continue, we have to do that together. It's one person is not, can't do it. It's the
Yeah.
person just, helps guide and encourage, and we all, then it's contagious, hopefully.
Yeah. And haven't some of the best times been when we're involved in something together as a community, bringing, I'll go back to the Lent event. So years ago, we needed to raise some money quick. And I was in the vestry and we were on this vestry retreat, and, you know, we got spreadsheets and lots of different color markers and I looked at Jack Tolliver and I said, okay, we need X amount of money. That's X amount of money divided by X amount of people is X amount of dollars per person. You know, this is what we need. It's pretty simple. So we came up with this Lent event where people could contribute they could just put in a check, and it was a minimum, it was $100 times 100 people makes $10,000. That would get us through. But if you didn't have the 100, you could make cookies or sell them, or in fact, Sue Mylander, that's where we
Those were the
introduced.
best cookies.
That was the
weren't they?
best cookies ever.
Oh my goodness.
The Sue Mylander cookie thing. I'm sorry I outed you. Because now everybody's gonna be looking at you with that kind of like, when is Sue Mylander gonna make the cookies, especially those like mint ones?
I don't remember.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah. That's because, you know, that's why I'm the size I am, because I remember those cookies. But I'll tell you, you know, as a community, we were brought together in such a lovely way. And the Lent event continued for several years, you know, trying to do that and just to be a part of the community. And what was nice was that we were brought together for the same goal, but everyone contributed differently. and maybe that's what we're sort of talking about here, is that we all contribute differently. Our abundance for each of us can be customized. It's a lovely thing, you know. Some days you get the Lexus of abundance, and some days you're getting the Pinto. You know, it's just, but it's, I just,
Well, to go off of that and the
Yeah.
Lent event specifically, I think this is the Lent event. It was like the first one or whatever.
purple envelopes.
Yeah, well, wasn't the Green Lake weekend offered in the Lent event?
The Green Lake, yeah.
And so
Oh,
I
yeah.
was, yeah, so the green, for those that don't know what that is, it's a
Speak up a
weekend.
little bit.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
Yeah.
The Green Lake weekend was offered up as a prize for the Lent event, I guess.
It was a
from
bed
the
and breakfast
Judds.
offered by the
Yeah, by the
judge,
judge,
who
yeah.
had a lovely,
Vinny.
lovely lake house in
Mhm.
Green Lake.
Yeah,
It was a
in
wonderful,
Wisconsin.
wonderful experience. And she was a child. She was,
Yeah,
and
I was
everybody
7.
loved her.
But I would date my sister, who's 3 years younger than I am, and I were the only 2 children there, and
Yep.
it was.
I'm like, you're going, man.
Yeah.
But
Because I want to
it
go to Green
was-
Lake.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It
That was-
has
That was a wonderful time.
the years that had gone by. I mean, I went until I was what, 18?
Close to it.
Yeah, 10 years.
It turned out way past the Lent event that we
Way-
would do
yeah.
those things.
And that's how I met Mrs. Dents
Mm.
and how I became so close with Mrs. Dents. It's the way that I met the Cardwells, who I don't refer to as the Cardwells. That's Mr. Bob.
Mr.
Yeah.
and Mr. Bob and
yeah.
Mrs. Bob.
Yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Bob.
Is he-
The Allisons and so many of these people that I would not have really gotten close to if I hadn't, you know, been a part of that community. And I think that over the years, this community has become a really beautiful place where I have felt loved and supported my entire childhood, and it continues to be that way.
Well, look who you're
because-
sitting next to and who you're talking to, and then who look
Hi,
who
Miss
you're,
Reed.
and you're sitting next to Mrs. Tolliver.
Yes.
And you've been
my
watched over.
confirmation
We
spouse.
are age agnostic here. We
Yeah.
are not, you know, you're not just hanging with your peeps.
Well, and the people that are my age, I'm still close with. Myself, Erin Delaney, and Caroline Fry, we're all out in DC. Will Delaney's going to be there in a few months.
And
we're-
Aaron and
Gino.
Aaron and
Caroline are gonna be roommates. I mean,
So
from
we
this
are-
church in
They-
DC.
Yeah, they already are roommates
Yeah.
and living in DC together. And Aaron and I went to an evensong service once at the National Cathedral. Like it just continues, and I continue to find that that community stays, and certainly over Facebook too. Like the people on Facebook.
And I keep telling you, there's gotta be some good singles groups at those big Episcopal parishes.
We're
in
gonna be on the
DC.
vestry somewhere soon. too, so.
Yeah.
I do have to say that because it's a little bit past the
Yep.
hour, this group certainly can continue, but we have to say goodbye to Zoom. And
Thank you. Thank you for
And,
joining. I
and
appreciate it.
before you go, just Martha, we love you. Let's give Martha applause. for-
Yay.